So today we want to talk a little bit about human-centered design and the intersection of the physical and digital worlds. And there's an inherent danger in always talking about design thinking with people who share your same viewpoint and background. So I do feel really lucky to have the chance to be talking about this with someone like you. You don't always agree with my perspective, you just bring your own kind of set of skills to the table.
We have a little bit of an anecdote to share with you all that probably ring true with a lot of you here. We'll have a client come to us to Effective UI for interface design for a product, say like a kiosk. Yeah. And they will have the expectation that someone else will do the physical design, someone else will do the environment design, another party will do the kind of style guide, and then the business team will hand over the functional requirements. That's all well and good, but nobody's encouraged or even allowed to talk. And we don't really think that's the best way to do user-centered design.
So our clients really perceive industrial design and digital interface design as being two separate disciplines. And in their eyes, industrial designers are over here, they're concerned with the making of physical objects, and digital designers are over here concerned with the making of websites and applications for screens. And the way our industry is set up really supports that misconception. So in my experience from design school curriculums into the first part of your career, you're really asked to pick a title to define who you are. And so you say, I'm a visual designer, or I'm an information architect, or I'm an industrial designer.
The truth is that from a lot of what we've heard over the last day or two, a lot of these disparate fields are actually interaction design.
Unless you don't have users.
Well, in the ridiculous case, you don't have users. Clients view our craft as this very siloed, segmented craft, and we really think that needs to change. We really need more opportunities to cross-pollinate and work with cross-disciplinary teams to generate that next generation of groundbreaking and innovative products.
And so for that to happen, we think the industry at large needs to change. We need to rewrite the stories we're telling about what we do and how we do it.
So let's take a step back and look at the history of interaction design. A lot of interaction designers have learned a lot of techniques and practices from their industrial design counterparts.
And it's not a new concept to talk about a human-centered approach to design. If you look back through history, there's plenty of industrial designers and architects who were talking about the same kind of things we tout now, and they were talking about it first. Getting down to specifics, let's talk about a few user-centered design principles that originated with industrial design.
The first of these we'll look at is affordance. That's the idea that, for example, this is the front door to Effective UI. You know how to use it because physically it works that way. Your hand naturally falls in a position to grab on one side and push, and grab on the other side and pull, either way opening the door.
In his book, The Design of Everyday Things, Don Norman talks about affordance, and it's really the need to provide an appropriate conceptual model for how something works without instructions. So the physical form is all the instructions the user should need. And then, of course, we're used to all those little bits and pieces of interfaces, UI, that use affordance to communicate what to do. So something's a switch, or something's a button that you can push, or something's sortable, draggable, a window that's resizable.
Interestingly, we're moving away from that need for very physical-looking buttons and very targeted places to hit. We're moving into this more flat, broad interface where things take over more of the screen. Windows Phone 7 is a very good example of this, and it's kind of a bold new step.
So another principle that we kind of see as originating with industrial design is the importance of providing feedback about the state or status of a system.
So for example, you can tell from this photo that if this was your apartment, the front door would be locked and deadbolted, it would not be chained, and that the lights would be on. And we can tell this by the way that all these things are positioned, the switches and the locks. When we talk about status, we can talk about conventions and learned ways of knowing the state of a system.
Digital interfaces have all kinds of opportunities for communicating status. This interface has a lot of cues in it, so there's files that are uploading, there's files that are waiting to upload, there's details about individual files and rates of speed.
The last thing we'd like to talk about is the idea of using constraints to prevent errors before they can occur. For example, this baby is in no danger of driving away in this car, as cute as it is. She'd have to insert the key, turn it, release the emergency brake, depress the clutch, and engage a gear without stalling the car. So we're talking about a series of checks to prevent your users from getting into a situation where they can't handle it.
So you have to deliberately drive a car. You can't accidentally drive a car.
Pardon me.
And a good UX designer will tell you there's no such thing as user error. So, you know, we're used to examples of this all the time. A Flickr date search where you don't really need to know how to format the date because you just pick one from the calendar widget. Or a form that is taking into account what the user is going to be entering into the different fields. So if you're asking for a website, you go ahead and put the HTTP in there. And then my favorite example, because I can't spell and I can't type, It's predictive search, so it's useful in itself because as you're typing, it's giving you suggested results of, do you mean this, do you mean this? But even if you type wrong and you misspell, you'll still get relevant results. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk some more about where we think the industry is headed in 2011.
Right. A lot of us are familiar with moments where industrial design has sort of failed at this approach to interaction design. This is one of those situations. They usually involve a screen or an interface with a system behind the screen, and it's usually designed by somebody that has a much better understanding of that system than the user's perception of that system, and that's kind of where we come in. So this is a Toto toilet. They're very common in Japan. I went to visit Japan and was totally mystified by this. I was under the impression that a toilet was a one-function kind of deal, not a menu and user option.
40 functions.
I'm sure those functions are great, but they're hard to decipher.
And a little scary. But still, we finally started to enter that promised era where computing is more ubiquitous and digital interactions are a much larger portion of our daily lives. And the interactions are becoming more useful, more usable, more desirable, and there's a more elegant handling of combination of object and screen.
But we've got a question for you all. How many of you think design digital applications for, say, screens, mobile, web? There we go.
Yeah.
And how many of you design things for, say, a physical product or an embedded system? And how many of you have had the opportunity to work on a cross-functional, cross-disciplinary team? That's good. Not quite as many.
Yeah.
We think there's an opportunity there for a lot of us.
We think that, so it's great to see that so many of you guys are, but we don't think that people are able to work in this cross-functional way often enough. And as a result of that, we're still falling short on some of the principles that have become a standard part of interface design for computers and mobile devices. We're seeing more and more of a blurring between the physical and digital world, and we need to start listening to that as a call to action for our industry.
And it's not just interaction design, but it's service design and branding, it's experience and product.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it seems like we're still too siloed, and we've got interface designers over here, and we've got brand people over here, and nobody's really talking to each other. This conference, I think, is a great exception to that. But anyways, let's first talk about a few of the principles that are current in digital interface design.
This is just a very small sampling
Yeah.
of what we're actually talking about, but these are the most relevant, we think. The first of these is adaptive display. Adaptive display is a display that learns the user's habits and changes its interface to support those habits most effectively. So this is the ATM that I use at Wells Fargo. My habits indicate that I either withdraw $60 or $80 or deposit a check. So if those are the goals on my mind, I get in and out with one button push and I'm done. If I do need to do something more complicated, I can always use the menu on the right and get through with that.
So the next principle is gaming and social media. So gaming, in its most basic definition, is something that's a structured experience, it has rules and goals, and it's fun. And then when you overlay social media on top of that, games become incredibly good at manipulating behavior. So they change over time in response to the player, and they reward or reinforce your continued participation. And we're starting to see more and more gaming mechanics in everyday applications. I think like Foursquare is a great example of that.
And finally, we'll look at information visualization. In his book, Beautiful Visualization, Noah Lindsay says that information visualization offers a fresh look at the data or a format that gives readers a spark of excitement and results in a new level of understanding. And that spark is really what we're talking about here. That spark is the difference between data and information. Information can be gleaned and understood and done something with. And like gaming and social media, information visualization can be a very powerful motivator of behavior. So let's take a look at a couple of objects that we redesigned. The truth is that these objects are fine. They didn't really need a redesign. They worked just okay. They weren't compelling or exciting in any way, but they were standard. We thought they could be better. So by employing these principles we talked about and working in a cross-functional way, Lindsay and I took a really hard look at these products and sought out a way to make them more compelling.
And so we wanted to do that by taking the digital design principles and kind of overlaying them onto a dishwasher and a thermostat. And in doing so, we were kind of spanning a gamut. So with the dishwasher, it was more of a simple redesign where we were adding a better screen and a better interface to a product that already has one, just not a very compelling one. And in the case of the thermostat, we were dealing with a more complex device ecosystem where we did redesign the interface of the thermostat, but also kind of that whole network of possibility associated with it.
So let's start with the dishwasher. We looked at it through the lens of adaptive interface and information visualization.
So again, going back to what Austin was saying, the dishwasher is a device that currently functions okay. I know how to set up my own dishwasher. I might struggle a little bit if I have to use the one at the office or at my friend's house, but I'm pretty smart and I can usually figure it out eventually. So you guys might be saying like, hey, I don't need my experience with my dishwasher to be great. And so if you're kind of thinking that, I would start to ask some questions. So can you easily tell when your load is clean or dirty? And when you are setting up your dishwasher and you're setting it to pots and pans or heavy or normal, do you really understand what system changes you're enacting? And really, maybe most importantly, from the perspective of energy and water use, do you know what the difference is between those settings? Probably not. And so most people don't know what they don't know, so they probably haven't ever stopped to consider that their dishwasher experience kind of sucks and it could be a lot better.
So let's take a look at an example that's really relevant in Boulder and kind of across Colorado. This is Joseph. He's an older guy. He considers himself green. And
Boulder hippie.
Yeah, the classic Boulder hippie professor kind of guy. He's always washed his dishes by hand because he thought it was the green option, but he's starting to wonder if these new eco-friendly appliances might be more friendly than leaving the water running for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. So he doesn't want to risk just jumping in, but he wants to see if there's a product that he can work with that will validate his trying to be green.
So while Joseph is running his dishwasher, he'd like to be able to tap the screen and bring up this view where he can see where he is in the cycle and how much water and power he's been using. Then also he can quickly delete the drying portion of the cycle if he doesn't think that's needed. And then he can see whether the load will be finished before he has to bike over to campus.
Like the ATM, the washer learns his most common settings. He's got a little bucket at the bottom that he can click on if he needs to go to his other stored programs. And then if he really isn't happy with any of those, say it's Thanksgiving and he has twice as many dishes to do, he can click Build Custom Program, swipe his finger across the screen, selecting options, and then hit Start to go.
So with the dishwasher, we really had 3 takeaways. The first is that information is interesting, and it's hard to care about the energy use of your appliances when you can't see it, so let's let people see it. The next is the importance of aligning with the user's mental model. So in our example, settings were presented in a matrix corresponding to a user's idea of more. So more scrubby, hotter, more dry, and less, so cooler, less power, no dry. And then finally, by using adaptive display, we were able to create a system that's efficient for many uses, many repeat uses, which is important obviously for a dishwasher, but also learnable and customizable when you need it to be.
The second one we looked at was the thermostat, but we didn't look at just the thermostat. We wanted to look at the home heating and air conditioning system. And we looked at it through the lens of information visualization and social and gaming media.
So the thermostat is one of those problematic devices in our homes. You don't really have to set it up very often. So when you do, like when the seasons are changing, you kind of every time you have to relearn how to do it because you can't remember. And there's little or no feedback about how efficient your schedule is, so it's hard to make intelligent adjustments about it. And more than likely, if you're hot or cold, you're just going to override the default settings in your scheduled program rather than going back and trying to evaluate how to make that scheduled program better and more appropriate for whatever time of year it is. Also, what's often in our homes is pretty old technology, and it's kind of just stuck on the wall of your living room or wherever it is. We're starting to see more Wi-Fi enabled thermostats that can communicate to an app on your smartphone, but the interfaces really still leave a lot to be desired.
So this is the Joneses. They're a 30-something couple from Minnesota. They've got a cute little kid, and they just recently renovated their house, and they want to try and incorporate smart home technology to make it more energy efficient.
So one of the things we really identified with a family like the Joneses is that since they're early adopters with technology, they're going to be more open to the idea that a thermostat doesn't have to just live on your wall. If everything in their home is networked, it can live on your wall, but it can also live on your smartphone, on your tablet computer.
So in this scenario, Carrie is adjusting the thermostat for a coming cold snap this evening. She can set the temperature here, view the system status, check on the outside temperature, get an idea of what the forecast is going to be, and there's even a little blurb about staying safe in a high wind chill factor scenario. So bundle up, your nose can fall off if it gets too cold.
And this is all possible because now her thermostat is kind of connecting to the outside world and being able to bring information into her home. So also because it's a touchscreen device and because the setup is controlled on a chart instead of having to page through different settings like I have to on my thermostat at home, Carrie has a better idea about how what she's changing relates to the overall setup. And she can also see this dotted line, which is estimated rate of change. And from this, she can learn that the system doesn't really go on long enough in the morning to get the house warm during the time she needs it to be warm. And that's something that she never really considered. So she's going to try to figure out how to make that more appropriate for when she wants the house to be warm.
Later on, Carrie's checking her email. She got a message from her electric and gas co-op letting her know that she should participate in an energy challenge. She logs onto their website, and there she sees that she can monitor her energy usage and even earn rewards for her energy greenness.
So the cold snap hits, and Mike and Carrie are on the couch watching TV while it snows outside. And Carrie's cold, and she wants Mike to go turn up the heat.
Mike recently downloaded a companion app for his smart thermostat, being a big geek like all of us. He can adjust the heat from the couch, which is really convenient. When he loads this app, he sees a notification that his neighborhood, who's all participating in this green movement, is just a few points away from an incentive on their next bill, and he wants to be the guy that makes those last few points. He also sees that he can get a badge for leaving the thermostat on a low setting for a cold evening, so he decides not to go with that and decides to get Carrie a blanket instead.
So Carrie's kind of annoyed with that, but secretly she wants the badge too, and she posts it to Facebook the next day. So with the thermostat, we had a few takeaways as well. First was the importance of reconciling the mental model with the system model. Thank you. We used the dotted line on the chart to help explain to the user that the system doesn't actually heat up instantaneously, which is what was her mental model of the system. And next was the importance of making the information actionable. So I kind of mean two things by this. The first is when information leads to understanding, it can help affect changes in behavior. But there's also kind of a more immediate concept of being actionable as well. So rather than requiring a complex setup across multiple screens, you're creating your thermostat schedule by directly manipulating the information on a chart on your screen. And then finally, the power of positive reinforcement along with community competition, which is really a key factor in social gaming. Positive reinforcement is that personal incentive, but then that along with community competition can be an incentive unto itself because you have to measure yourself by and be accountable to your community.
So now that you've had a chance to see the way we approach the interaction design problem in the physical space, let's review the principles of design that we used as kind of a lens this whole time. The first was aligning with users' mental models. The second was providing appropriate feedback. And the third was eliminating the chance for error. Then we talked about learning and adapting the interface to the user behavior, motivating with gaming and social media, and letting information spark understanding and even delight in the user's experience.
So we feel like the first three of these principles have a pretty mature expression across design disciplines today. On the other hand, the other three, we think they're kind of siloed in practice. So we see rich expression of them in digital interfaces, but kind of feel like the design of physical products isn't necessarily keeping pace with that. And even discussions about the principles within the digital space feel siloed to me. So information design, for example, has become its own discipline, but in such a way that it feels like it's really abstracted from all of the other factors that make up solving problems for users. We really need to find a better marriage of our old standby design thinking with all of the new principles we're uncovering every day, and we need to make sure we're applying them in a more broad sense across what we do.
These fuzzy labels don't do us any good, and they don't do our clients any good. The clients think we do one thing, and from the stories we tell, they'd be right. But should they be? Think back to the kiosk, or think about, say, a car maker. They have a showroom, they have a brand, they have a body for the car, they have a dashboard, and they have a website. And none of these teams tend to talk to each other. We have a very narrow set of honed skills and a broad understanding of how to apply them. We should really be using that.
In order to better accommodate the breadth of what design thinking can represent, especially in a world where the distinction between physical and digital is evaporating, we really need to reframe what we do and what we call ourselves. We're all interaction designers, and that's why we're all here today. But I would say what is represented in this room is not the feeling or the way I hear people talking about themselves kind of in business and in the way they work. So I hope that we can take these multiple disciplines and start to really consider the way they are all interaction design.
Thanks.